this, the very bottom line shows our percentage fund balance. And if we look back in 2009, fund balance was about 28%, and then you see a pretty sizable jump to 33.56% at the end of the following year. That was the year, I know some of you were on the board at the time, it was the year that I actually came into the role I currently have. And we cut our budgets district-wide just under $2 million. We actually saw state revenues and local revenues come in about $1 million less than we had the previous year, but we cut almost $2 million. In the interim, we also had the ERA money from the federal government and another little bit of bonus money, which was about $700,000. So the reason there's such a jump in the reserves is we didn't have the expenditures, or we didn't have the decrease in revenues we thought we would, and we had this boost of federal money. So what we did was we moved the maximum amount we could over to Fund 4. Even after having done that, we still increased our reserves by 5%. Because it was just unanticipated. We thought we were going to have $2 million less in revenue, and we only had $1 million less in revenue, and we got all this federal money on top of that.
And then we had to track that for every job that was saved.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you see those numbers at that point. And the other piece we always need to realize when you look at the reserve is a percentage of what you spend in Fund 1 and Fund 2. Well, if you're increasing your expenditures in Fund 1 and Fund 2, your reserve, even if the amount of money stays the same, the reserve will go down. If you spend less, like we did between 09 and 10, if you spend less money, your reserve, the same amount of money, is going to go up because your expenditures are less. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we look at that reserve number. It's not a static number. It's going to depend on what you're spending out of Fund 1 and Fund 2. Are there any questions on general fund or teachers fund and where we kind of think we're going to, because the final picture of where we think we're going to end up at the end of this year, we believe we're going to end up total expenditures of about $24.87 million. We budgeted $25.26 million. We're going to spend, I think, about $391,000 less than we actually budgeted. Now that will increase our reserves. We had budgeted that our reserves would increase to, or be at 29% at the end of this year. Our projection is they may end up at about 32% at the end of this year.
So as far as the teachers, any thought on what we can increase their pay to?
I think it's really difficult, and I'm going to talk about that. That's one of that's under salary schedules I wanted to talk about, because I think we need to be very cautious. I am all for increasing the amount that we pay our staff, but I think we need to be very cautious when we get to that, and I will address that. I'll address that.
At the top of that sheet, that there's a typo right there on that, 2013, 2014, 2015.
Yeah, I think.
But they're at the top.
Yeah.
Are you looking at the last page, Jane?
Yes, the last page.
Last page.
The fourth column has a blank.
That is.
Oh, the column has
Yep.
it down.
Yeah, that's okay.
That is. Yeah, what's up there in the pink is the accurate.
2014.
The next piece I want to give you is Fund 4. Fund 3 kind of takes care of itself, and that is our debt service, and our levy at 87 cents covers our debt service. We've done several things over the last several years to make sure, even without increasing local revenue, that we've been able, or local assessed value, that we've been able to maintain that and pay our debts without increasing our taxes in that. So currently our levy is 87 cents, and that is, at this point in time, sufficient looking forward to pay those debts that we currently have. Fund 4 is capital projects. And you know, it's not only capital projects, but the only place we can pay a lease from is Fund 4 as well. So as we talk about, you know, David was talking about a lease for an upgrade of the wireless. Well, that payment has to come out of Fund 4. We have a lease for the laptop computers at the high school. That also has to come out of Fund 4. So as we look at this, we have revenues that come into Fund 4. We have some local sources of revenue that come into there. That's remained relatively consistent. 5 years ago, we had $662,000 in revenue that came in, and we currently have $679,000 in revenues that come into Fund 4. And the primary sources of those revenues are things like our M&M surcharges, our Walmart payments. Those payments actually go in there, and that's the primary piece of that $635,000 in revenue that we think we're going to receive into Fund 4 this year. As you move down under our expenditures,
Tim, you mentioned we moved money from Fund 1 to Fund 4. How much?
Well, if you look down here under the 2010-11 actual, it's about 5-6 lines from the bottom. It says other financing sources, transfer from general fund. We moved $1 million at the end of the fiscal year of 2011, which was our maximum amount we could actually move. So we moved $1 million.
Moved that for the devices.
No, that was 5 years ago. That's because we had so much. Again, we cut drastically and had not the cuts we expected in revenues, and we had other federal money that came in. So we made a
We
decision.
had catch-up maintenance to do for.
We had some big catch-up maintenance to do. Yeah. So the big expenditures that we have out of Fund 4, if you look down there, you'll see principal redemption, lease purchase. The pieces that you're going to see at $608,000. Within that, that's going to be where our wireless lease comes in. It's going to be where our computer lease comes in. About $70,000 of that is actually our copiers lease we currently have. We had it under a different line item previously, but it's now more of a true lease, so it has to go under this line item at this point in time. We actually did save money by the copier change that we made in the last year.
So from 13 to 14, I see, as I said, you jumped 400, not quite 400,000.
Part of that is
39 to 608.
Yep, Kathy, that is the copiers, that is the Apple lease that come into that. So I think as we look at the bottom, what's important to see is under ending fund balance, where we've actually ended up in Fund 4, we do not have a levy that actually goes directly into Fund 4. It is financed purely by those few revenue sources that we have, and then transfers that we make from our general fund into that. In 2010-11, we made $1 million transfer there. We had over $3 million in that account. And we really haven't made, with the exception of in the 2013 fiscal year, we put $200,000 in there. We haven't really put any money into that Fund 4 at this point in time. That's paid for all of our capital improvements. That's paid for any leases we might have. Anytime we purchase equipment, it has to come out of Fund 4. The projection at the end of this year, we will be down to $667,000
So
approximately in Fund 4, which is considerably more than we thought we would be at.
Well, and that has enough funds to take care of air conditioner, roads.
Well, it's one of those pieces that we're going to have to look at the end of this fiscal, as we start planning for capital projects over our summer. We're going to have to look to see, do we need to transfer something from our Fund 1 into this fund so we can support what those are when we calculate in what our other revenues are going to be and what our total expenditures are going to be out of that. I don't know the answer to that at this point in time, because I don't have a capital projects list that we finalized at this point.
Now, where does Airmark come in at, what we paid it?
That's Fund 1.
Fund 1. I'm going to go back to Fund 1. Can you tell me what we paid Airmark last year?
I believe it was $172,000, $175,000, somewhere in between.
That's somewhere in there.
So, if that is budgeted to Airmark, can you tell me how much we actually spent with Airmark? We spent all of that, or did
That is our cost
Okay.
for our agreement we have with Aramark.
Okay, but you can't tell me exactly how much we cost. Did we spend $150,000?
We spend 170, whatever amount. We pay it up front. We pay it in June for the next fiscal year.
Well, you not understanding the question, but actually, I know that it's $171,000.
Yes.
But can you give me a hard number to actually, what happens if we don't spend $171,000? What happens to that additional money, does that go directly to Airmark whether we spend it or not?
The way the agreement works is, it is for their services, and we've had them for 30 years now.
Sure.
For their services, we pay them a set amount. And that's the set amount. There's no additional on top of that. There's nothing less than that.
Could we ever get a hard number from them, let's say that, and as an example, we spent $150,000 with them, but the budget was $171,000, so they kept $21,000 additional fund. Is there any way we can get a hard?
It's a piece I've already requested from them.
So you're looking at a cost not to exceed for,
No, it's not a cost not to exceed. We write a check to them for $170-some thousand, and they
Basically,
provide their service for
What
it.
I'm getting at.
The question I've asked from them is, I want a detailed accounting of what monies you actually spent of that. They're a business, and they're gonna make a profit. We all understand that.
Sure.
But I think that profit needs to be a reasonable amount.
Well, when
I've already requested that in the last month.
What I'm getting at is that if they spend $150,000 and we gave them a check for $171,000, then, and they kept $21,000, then there better be a lot of paint, building
There
going on.
better be a lot of stuff they do for us
Exactly,
for that amount of
and
money.
I think that needs to be implied.
We've gotten to the point with them 2 years ago. My concern was when you have an agreement with someone over 30 years, imagine an incremental increase of.
And I'm not saying anything wrong with it.
No,
I'm
I
saying
completely
that. I'm
understand
just
that.
saying that.
We had an issue a couple of years ago when you imagine an incremental increase every year of 1 or 2% or whatever that might be over a 30-year span of time. We get to the point where we don't actually know what the cost of their service is any longer. What we asked for 3 years ago, and they did drop their price just under $20,000, was I want the price that you're going to give us if we were going out to you to bid today. If I ask somebody else to bid and you're going to bid competitively, what's that going to be? Because I think we've got an inflated price. We're paying $20-some thousand less today than we were 3 years ago. So we've done some of that, but I would also, what I've asked for them is I would like to see the detailed accounting of what does Aramark actually spend on our account. And granted, they're going to make a profit, they're a business, but what amount is that they actually make?
How much longer is our lease with them?
We have 2 more years, I believe, on our agreement with Aramark.
Do we have an option of not going with this new system that you put salt in the machine and it makes a super water that is supposed to clean and staying with our cleaning products? I mean, I've been researching it and the reports aren't good.
Well, and that's again, that's an Aramark expense. Obviously, we're paying for it in some form or fashion. What I'm told by them is this is the best product for the safety of our kids because there is no cleaning solution. And my job is to figure out, as we use that over time, are buildings less clean or are they just as clean as they were before? Because it's ionized water that they're using, but I can't judge whether what they're using now is what they're going to is the same as what we currently have or not as good. If it's not as good and our buildings aren't as clean, then we have to look at that and say, you know what, we're going to have to ask for. We're going to have to ask for you to go back to your cleaning Santa Master and all the other items that you actually use. But if it's safer for our kids and fewer chemicals, I'm siding on if we can actually get just as clean of buildings with safer products around our students, then I'm all for that. But I don't know at this point if it's cleaner or not. We haven't been using it long enough actually to know what the return on it is.
what's the good news of carpeting, because they had to replace a lot of carpeting a couple of years ago because they didn't have.
That was, we purchased a lot of carpet from Aramark in 2009. And we kept replacing it because it was the color match warranty. So as you put one bolt of carpet up next to the other one, the color match wasn't absolutely perfect. So now they would come in and replace it all. Well, if you're in a library, this is not the easiest thing to do every summer, is to clean out your entire library so they can come back in, or a classroom for that matter, and replace it. We did a buyout of the warranty on the carpet for the color match with them 3 years ago in the order of about $150,000. That is how we got all the flooring paid for on the first floor of ECC. That's what we used that money to actually buy. So it was under the color match warranty piece. It wasn't damage to the carpet. The carpet wasn't wearing out. It was just the color wasn't a perfect match. And got to the point where I don't care so much about that. If the carpet's good, it's the inconvenience to our staff. It's
Well,
a bigger
yours
issue.
is probably further back than that. They got new carpeting pieces, HEX.
Well, I think there were It may have gone farther back to that. The only one I would know about, because I was here in 2010, would be back to 2009.
Yeah, it can be a lot of
Yeah, I think it was before he was here, we had a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
of-
It was over that color match piece that we finally just said, and that was probably 2012, stop, enough's enough. So,
Are all districts in our county using an outside maintenance?
this is the only district I've ever been in that does. It was an anomaly to me when I got here.
Does that amount include the cleaning staff? Custodial?
No, that does not include, the custodians are Harrisonville School District employees. Custodians, maintenance workers are all Harrisonville employees.
That's for cleaning supplies and.
That's for cleaning supplies, that's for all the cleaning equipment, that's for the Aramark manager, gets paid underneath that, and it's for, I will say, Aramark does have an excellent training program for, they use the same training for our staff that they would use if it was Aramark staff, which is a good piece for safety for our people. But all those pieces fall under that, and the equipment's huge. It's a huge cost with that.
And that safety program is, the best values fall for the OSHA.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we appreciate that you have already requested an accounting from them exactly how that money is spent, and we realize it's an issue that you inherited.
I guess one other question, when will the items be shared with the board, what the improvements we're gonna do over the summer? When does that come in?
That is one of those, Kathy and I are going to begin meeting with all the budget managers, all the principals, all the directors. I have a preliminary list of capital projects. We're going to begin meeting with them in the 1st of April as they get a better idea of things that they need coming up. We'll have a pretty good number by the end of April on what our capital projects are going to be, because we have to, because some of those projects need to be started the day that school is out for us to get them completed by the time August starts.
Now, do the principals have any say in their buildings on that? Or
Yes.
So the principals are involved in that?
Yes.
To say, I have a need?
Usually what happens is about the end of the month of March, Bill Hewlett or whoever our manager with Aramark is, we walk every building with every principal, look at needs and other pieces, and that's how we kind of figure out some of those items. Oh, you're welcome. The last piece I have for you is salary schedules. And what I wanted to do was, I wanted to give you our current salary schedule, and this is just for teachers. This is our teacher salary schedule. We currently have 219 teachers that fall onto this schedule. I want to give you that is just a single piece. And the next piece I'm going to give you is when I take the 219 teachers and where each one of them falls on our schedule, I want to give you the numbers for what the cost of the schedule is and what the cost of a single step of that schedule actually is. So that's the next piece that you're actually going to get. If you look at the second piece that I gave you, in the lower right, you'll see a number there, not quite towards the bottom, but it says 2014-15 and then T, because it's for total. The total in this year that we're spending on the salary schedule is $9,581,000. Okay. A couple lines up, you're going to see a number that is $9.693 million. If we do nothing to the salary schedule, and we allow everybody to have their steps, and this is not including any educational movement if they slide over to a different column, the very bottom number that you see down there, just allowing the schedule to move, is an additional $128,000. Now that includes the increase in salary, which is $112,000, but we also, remember, on every salary, we pay, each employee pays and we pay an additional 14.5% to the public school retirement system. So the benefit they would get, that cost would be an increase of just letting the schedule move is $128,000, and that is simply for teachers. That does not include any of our classified staff. It doesn't include any administrators. These are just teachers that fall within this schedule. Okay. last board meeting, we had Kurt Swanson here from the Missouri NEA and talk about how they see schedules being built. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this to you is I want your ideas on how you want two pieces. How you want a schedule built. The second piece is, what are we comfortable with spending out of our reserves? Because if you look at our budget history, I would not say we have any anticipation of huge revenue increases. So anything that we spend is going to come out of, effectively, it's going to come out of our reserves. We're looking at a possibility of a 32% reserve this year, and that, in my opinion, is too high. But if we're going to go back and we're going to say, just for instance, we're going to increase the teacher salary schedule, total increase they will see in the whole schedule is going to be around $300,000. Not only will that money come out of the reserves, but now that we're spending more money, by the nature of the reserve, it will actually be less itself. I have to be very honest, my comfort level in a reserve at a district this size is around 20%. And I think lower than that starts to get to be irresponsible. Because we have to make sure we have enough in our reserves that we can make payroll in November and December, because we don't get our revenue, local revenues, until partially in late December and then in January. So we have to make sure we always have enough in reserves for that. So if you look at just moving the schedule, it's about $128,000. The next piece I have for you is an example, and please, I am not recommending this. I'm not recommending this at all. But what I want you to see is, and this is a schedule that I have built where I center loaded the schedule. And what I mean by that is every column increases at 1.4% until you get to year 10. Year 10 begins increasing at 1.7%. At step 16, it goes back to a 1.1% increase. So what that's doing is teachers are now going to be having, they're going to have a greater career earnings, because they're earning it beginning, the bigger pieces beginning year 10 through year 15. Their percentages are lower past that. However, they've been making that money for years prior to that. So having built that, and I added $700 onto the base and brought it up to $34,000. If we look at the bottom number, once again, with PSRS, that is a $411,471, or $411,471 is what that would cost us. Just that number is a 1.8% reduction in our reserves. And I think it's probably actually more than that, because I didn't calculate in the fact that we're spending more within that. It's going to be over 2%.
So we're still at 30%.
Well, we would be probably at 28, 29.
28.
But if we were to implement something like this, this is $411,000. And again, this is just for teachers. Doesn't include our classified staff or anything else. And we let it run with just steps. Next year, it's an additional $532,000. The following year, it's an additional $650,000. Because the steps, as people move down, they're going to be making more, or they're going to be making more, and those steps moving are going to cost us more each year. So if we were to implement a schedule such as this, which I am not recommending at this point, we would probably see our reserves within 3 years be in the low 20s.
What did you say is the percentage?
It's 1.4 down to step 10. Beginning of step 10, it's 1.7. Personally, I would be more comfortable with us looking at, we have 411,000 here, looking at something where all of the staff salary increases are more in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. Because the other thing we've got to remember is health insurance is another cost that's going up for us. My initial numbers that we got are about $120,000 increase on health insurance for our employees. So that also comes into that piece that you see there. If we had that, if we were to spend somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000 additional on salaries, we added another $120,000 in. When Kurt Swanson was here from the Missouri NEA, he recommended us spending an additional $530,000. Last week, I met with MSTA, and I do have some information for you on that. Their recommendation is an additional $486,000. We're in that range, just with implementing something to that degree. But I need to get your all's comfort level as I look to a schedule to make a recommendation to you of what we should do. But I think we need to be very cautious.
My comfort level is 20 to 25%, because I do not want to get to the point to where we were right before I got on board.
It was, time was very, very hard.
That was a miserable time. You know, were you on board with that?
Joe knows, what do we have financially stressed? Yeah.
And that's what my concern is.
You know, if we were in a scenario, as we look at, and I talked about Fund 3 just a little bit, as we build our bond repayments, those are typically built on a 2 and 4% growth. A non-assessment year is a 2% growth in our assessed value, an assessment year is a 4% growth. If that's the scenario we were in, it would be very different, because I would be comfortable in saying, you know, we can spend $500,000 additional into our schedule, or $600,000, knowing that that's going to cost more the following year, but I would also know our revenues are going to be increasing at a steady level. And we have not seen revenue increases, quite honestly, in the last 6 years.
Well, I know when we compare our salaries to other districts, we are more competitive at a beginning salary than we are at the middle and the
You're
advanced.
correct.
Which is why we have no problem attracting teachers. We have a problem maintaining them. So I see that we need to concentrate our increases more in the center and the end
Okay.
of our salary. That's where we're losing our teachers. And you know, a lot of them don't want to go. They can't afford to stay.
Sure.
And that's where my concern is. I know that one of the reasons we worry so much about the base is because that's where the coaches get their raises. I would rather see you increase their percentage so that they get what they need, rather than increasing the base. You also are rewarding teachers that don't have the experience or the extra education by increasing the base, rather than those that have the experience and more education. I think that's where we need to put it.
You're absolutely correct. And one of the things I would like to see is a schedule. I'm not a huge fan of our current schedule. I think it's somewhat quirky and clunky.
Yes.
I would like something that's percentage-based, because to me it makes more sense. That's just too lame. So I would rather see something that is that way, and we get a schedule that we like. And as we move forward, the only discussions we have about what we're going to do on the salary schedule are what are we going to add to the base at that point in time, because then it flows through the entire schedule. Because manipulating the whole schedule, it's very hard to compare that one year to the next. And the challenge in doing that is, in any manipulation of the schedule, we have to make sure that no staff member is going to make less than the previous year. And if we're going to spend overall more money, we want to make sure every staff member is seeing a raise just by the schedule moving in the following year. And that's a challenge just by looking at every line item and every bit of it. But
Well, it makes sense what Susie had said. The bulk of it should be within teachers that are established. The best thing we have is teachers.
yep.
And this is what makes the district.
You know, I think it's about time that we prioritize our people, not just teachers, but all of our staff, because we lose qualified people because they leave. And they leave because they simply can't afford to stay here. Another reason that we're seeing people move out is because we don't have affordable housing in this community. I mean, if we hire somebody, they live in Pleasant Hill because they can find housing. I mean, so affordable housing is one factor. But I think in the last 10 years, to steal a phrase from you, we have money and we look at money that we could spend on people and we go off and chase shiny things. I think it's what you talk about, you know.
It's a term I've used.
And we need to say, you know what, this is time, if we're going to tighten our belt, and I agree, you maintain conservative values. Part of the reason we got in trouble Well, what part of the reason, the big reason that we were a stressed school district years ago is because we had not enough money to complete a building project. And we took money from the left side of the budget to the right side. And that put us in a stressed school district situation. And what Todd did was project that we would not have a tax increase if we moved debt from one side of the budget to the other. And if you for those of you who've been around here, you remember that we went from a 1 to 3% range up to 12, just almost like snapping your finger. And that was just a simple majority vote that didn't cost us anything. The reason we took that vote is because that was the first opportunity we had to take it. Is that not correct, guys? You're on board with that thing?
I wasn't on board.
But, you know, I think it's time we tighten our belt, and if we have to not spend money in some areas, we spend it on people this year.
We also have issues with our schedule where, you know, steps 1 through 6, all the way across specialist, you get a $400 raise. Then you get into steps 6 through 9, you get a $400 raise. Until you get to MS plus 10, you get $700 all the way across. Then you get 1,000, well, you get 400 from step 11 clear over until you get to a master's plus 10, and then you get 1,000. You drop down here to master's plus 20, and for years 25 on down, you get $2,000. But if you have a specialist or a master's plus 35, you're only getting 1,000.
That's the quirky and clunky part, I think.
It is, and why somebody with more education is making 1,000 less than somebody with less?
At least in their raise they receive, yeah.
Yes.
Well, even in the BS plus 10 column, because I was looking at this tonight, there are 4 years you get a $400 increase going down. Then there are 4 years you get 1 year you get an $800 increase. Anyhow, it's totally where in the very first BS column you just get $500 a year increase every year. It just is more logical.
Which is why I think it's a lot cleaner to attribute percentages to each one of those steps moving down the columns, because it is more clear. And if you're making $35,000, 1.4% is a certain amount for you. But if you're making $37,000, 1.4% is a greater increase than that because it's based on a percentage. And I think I would be more comfortable with the schedule that was like that, rather than set step amounts of $400 here or $600 there or whatever that might be, because that just seems clunky.
One of the reasons it appears quirky is because when Mr. White was the superintendent, he looked at the schedule, and there were parts of the schedule that had no one there. There were steps that were empty, steps on the stair, and he adjusted. It was actually a really good way of doing things at the time, but as our demographics changed and our stress levels changed, we didn't keep up with it, and we kept the odd building of the schedule.
That's correct. That's how we got those clunky things.
Yeah.
Targeting.
But it was very good at the time. It was very equitable.
Shorting areas that don't help people.
Now, if we do a percentage, is that the same thing as years ago we requested an index?
That is exactly. An index is a little bit different. And an index really is, let's assume the very base is 1.
Okay.
And then every other piece within that schedule, like, at specialist 30 years, instead of being 1, it might be 1.9. So it builds based on the 1. So, your next step might be a 1.1 in the bachelor's column. Well, if you're at bachelor's plus 10, you might be starting at a 1.2 or whatever that might be. That's an index scale.
So the percentage is different?
Yeah, it is, but it's indexed based on that first piece, that first starting piece, and you index it off. There are districts that do that.
One thing with this moment, how do you propose to go with teachers and then discuss this with?
We actually have a Team Harrisonville meeting this next Tuesday, and salary is going to be one of the discussions, as well as benefit side. We're going to have our Blue Cross Blue Shield CBIZ representatives there to talk about our insurance increases that we're going to work through. But that's the purpose of that group, is to look at salary. It's the salary and benefits meet and confer group, to kind of get an idea of, you know, that it's an opportunity for me to get input from all of them, at the same time for me to give them information on what we're really comfortable with and what we can and can't afford to do.
What percent are we looking at insurance?
9.3%. Now, I will tell you, 9.3 seems bad, but if you look over the last 5 years, we haven't increased in total 9.3% over the last 5 years. So
It's not less than $40 per month.
yeah, it's for the district, it's about $120,000.
The other thing, when I was looking at this and you gave it to us here, we have 110 people in the MS column,
Yes.
okay? And we get down here and we have people that are stagnating. How can we encourage them to move? Is there any
Well,
way?
the only way you do that is you could add steps, or you can simply begin to increase the right side columns on the education is going to pay you even better, because you know, I don't consider when someone is bottomed out in a column and they haven't gotten additional education, they're not frozen on the schedule, they just haven't gotten additional hours.
Yeah,
We give them
right,
more
right.
years.
And that's understandable.
So,
That's a choice.
yes.
Well, it's also based on needs. When you get to a certain level, they may not have the need, and they may just be going to college to increase their salary, and it's not really benefiting the district. And additionally, I mean, if we're not paying our teachers enough, they can't afford to go get additional income. They spend their time getting jobs at Lowe's and
Thank you.
In the library.
you know, they're doing part-time work so they can afford to survive. And we're not paying enough. We don't do anything to reimburse our teachers' salaries.
And Marv, I don't disagree. We need to pay our teachers more. We just need to have a controlled fashion in which we increase our salary schedule, that
Right.
we can maintain our reserves over a period of time, because a single act of changing the schedule this year has huge impacts financially 3, 4, 5 years down the road. In the scenario where I cannot predict revenue increases, it's just
One
hard to
thing,
do.
Tim, I don't mean to interrupt, but one thing we've done, we've created new positions that become recurring costs. So,
I mean, those are all pieces that have to be considered.
and the Obama money offered us opportunities to add positions, but then it ran out and the positions remained.
It was one-time money. That is all I have. If you have any questions, I'll certainly entertain those. I hope that got you a lot of information on those
You
budget
did.
issues where we are.
Thank you. You did a nice job.
And I think what you did with the schedule is what you'd heard us say before, that we wanted to increase it over here in the masters, but also, yeah, we appreciate that. Okay, we are going to move into closed session. So, be back here in about 5 minutes.
You need to make a motion to go
We
into
gotta
closed
move in.
session. I so moved.
Okay. Okay, Marvin.
Yes.
Chad. Susie moved and Chad seconded that we go into closed session. Marvin.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Gerald. Marie, yes. Joe. Yes. Okay. Thank you all.